Hello, everybody. It's Matt here with Matt Wanders. I'm going to talk about travel today. I've got some notes for you. I'm going to talk about why I love to travel, or why I travel so much, would be a better way to put it, because I don't always love to travel. But I travel a lot, not as much as some people who you see are like literally always traveling. You see some YouTubers like that, but I would say more than the average bear. I'm out of the country, doing different things, and I've kind of been able to set my life up in a way where I have businesses that are local businesses in Austin, and I'm able to run them remotely at least part of the time. So what usually tends to happen, I'm finding, is like I'll be here, there will be either an emergency or something where I need to build a specific part of the business and actually be here for that. So I'll spend a month or two really focused on that, and then I will leave town. And I might leave town for a month, I might leave town for a week. It depends. I've never gone out of town for more than a little bit over a month at a time, but often I'll be out of town. Like if you took any 3-month period, I'd probably be out of town more than I'm actually here. So why do I do that? It's an interesting question, because unlike some people, well, let me actually start with my history of travel. I didn't grow up in a family that traveled a bunch. I know some families it's normal to take all these trips. I can remember very little traveling as a kid, and it was mostly to the typical family type stuff. Like we would go to Disneyland or whatever, and even that was only a couple times. We just didn't do too many travel things. Part of that was that one of the cool features of my childhood was that I grew up in a beach town, so there was no reason to go to the beach. The beach was there. I was already in a place that people would want to spend summer, so we would just kind of hang out there most of the time, and that was the summer break. You wouldn't have to go somewhere else for the break. Don't get the wrong idea in your head, my childhood was as screwy as anyone else's. So I didn't do much traveling until I was off to college, and then I would start kind of visiting various places. My friend and I and his family would take sometimes road trips across the country, which is pretty cool. If you've never driven across the U.S., you don't have a good sense of just how big of a country this is. There are huge amounts of land in the middle of the U.S., and you can drive for sometimes just in a straight line for hours without seeing anyone. So that's kind of a funny thing. And then I went abroad for the first time. I was in well into my 20s the first time I went abroad. Maybe for many people, or maybe most people, that's normal, and some people never leave the country. But considering the fact that I'm out of the country all the time now, that was kind of a late start for me. So for me, though, the idea of going to a resort or to just sit around during travel is total, it's a disaster. And I've said before, if you put me in a resort, I feel like I'm in a prison. It's the last thing I want to do. I mean, sometimes for a day, maybe two, sure, let's go hang out at the beach, have some drinks. But if that's the entire vacation, or the entire trip, it gets pretty boring. And in fact, I don't really think of my traveling as vacation, because I am working remotely. Many times I'm doing my work while I'm on the trip, so it's not even a vacation in the traditional sense at all. And for me, it's more about the life experience and the adventure of it than it is about taking time off or anything like that. So there's a couple interesting things when you start to travel that much. Is if you don't travel much, you might have this romanticized notion in your head that when you take a trip, it's just everything goes well because you're not at work, right? But there's a lot of downsides to traveling. You're spending a lot of time in the airport. If you're going to a different time zone especially, you're exhausted. Even if you're not going to a different time zone, there's just something about flying that throws your body off, maybe just the change of altitude up and down. So you just feel really kind of tired a lot of the time. And if you are in a different time zone, especially if it's a big difference, you're going to feel really disoriented. there's just the stress of going into a different culture and trying to adapt to that. And if it's a different language, like just not knowing how to get around, and that can vary from culture to culture. Like if you go from the US to Canada, you're probably not going to notice too much. Even from the US to Australia, like it's probably going to be somewhat similar culturally. But for example, like the US to Japan, you're going to be like, whoa, this is a very big cultural difference. Or like the US to Africa, you're going to feel really a little bit of culture shock when you travel. So even despite that, I still like to do it. And there are times when I'm lonely. There's at times even when I'm depressed when I travel because I'm not around people. Somehow for me, there's a cathartic element to it. There's a catharsis of like taking a step outside of my life and analyzing everything. And I find that changes me. Every time I leave where I am, where I leave that mindset of where I am. For instance, if I'm like in my work and I'm focused on a specific problem, just being physically distant makes me feel like I have some perspective on it. And I know I'm not unique in that way. A lot of people feel that way. There's that kind of cathartic element of like I'm actually kind of growing from the experience and changing. And then there's the escape sort of element, like I'm just escaping my current problems. Things that seem important when you're around the world, they might still be important, but it somehow just seems more abstract. It's like, well, I'm in Australia right now, so whatever happens can't really affect me. I guess actually, I had a lot of trouble in Australia, but I'll tell you about that later. And I get a kick also out of this being in another world. Like, especially for whatever reason, when I go to Latin America, like I go to Colombia a lot, it just is, I get a real kick out of the fact that there's huge cities there that like a lot of people probably don't even know exist. And that you go there and it's just this whole nother set of people going about their lives like with their own concerns and their own things. To me, it feels as though I was transported to Mars and there's an alien culture in some way. And not that people from foreign countries are like aliens, but that I feel that way, that I feel like I'm in a different place and that there's all this life going on, there's all this stuff going on that I'm just oblivious to in my day-to-day experience. And somehow feeling like I'm from the outside looking in those times, there's something unique about that. I can't quite put my finger on it, but I think I get a kick out of that, and I get a kick out of the fact that there are certain places around the world where if I need to get away for a week, I kind of have like my private retreat where it's just a place I can go. I've done all the touristy things. It's not like I'm trying to see something new there, but I can just go there and separate, disconnect, and it's like my own little bubble, my own little escape from the world. And I don't know, maybe I have a psychological issue. Maybe I'm looking for something more. Maybe on some deep-seated level, I'm just very unhappy with my life, so I need to leave and go to other places. I'm not sure. Or maybe I just need to disconnect. But it's interesting to me that I feel so driven to do it, even though it's not always particularly fun in the sort of vacation Disney World sense. And then finally, of course, just seeing other people. I have friends. I'm really lucky to have friends around the world, and to meet people from other countries or from other cultures. Even if it's not a culture that you would think of as particularly exotic, there's always some little difference in how they view the world. I'm from a very traditional gringo family. For example, where, if we touch, it's just like a little hug, and we don't really talk to each other too much. We call home every once in a while. And for example, most of my friends who are from more of the Latin American culture are extremely close to their family, always talking to them. It's very common for them to live in close proximity. And those cultural differences are really fascinating to me. And maybe it makes up for a little bit of the distance I feel in my sort of own culture, that I can kind of vicariously experience this other way of seeing the world. This, for example, this other way of interacting with family, with friends. So, there's that, and then there's also the other side of it is the more you travel, the more you just see that people are the same. Not always. I mean, there's people who, for example, are awful, but for the most part, everyone in the world, by and large, tends to be a good person who's trying their best to get through life, and they seem to just have the same set of basic desires. They want to meet a partner. They want to feel like their life is fulfilling in some way, it's fascinating to see that despite all the differences, there's usually these kind of similarities among people. I find it fascinating. So that's why I like to travel. That's why I travel, and that's why if you come to Austin, try to find me. There's a probably 50% chance I'm not going to be here. I will see you in the next video. If you like this, by the way, please like and subscribe. It means a lot. It's just like a nice thank you for me. I put these things out every day, whether you like it or not. So I will see you in the next video.